Hey there everyone, AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. How's it going? I make videos about Dungeons & Dragons lore. Full-time, thanks to your generous support, shares and views, with multiple uploads every week to help share the rich history of monsters, locations and mythologies of D&D. I also make rambling videos about Dungeons & Dragons in general. Today, I'm going to be talking specifically about actually running a complicated encounter in great detail, so you can master, well, being a dungeon master. So an encounter doesn't begin with an initiative roll. It begins with rumours and observations. This is where we talk about regional effects, proximity, population, hearsay, local lore, and other interested parties. The players have either got some information which has drawn their characters to a particular location, or they find themselves in an area with some other agenda in mind. But something has drawn their interest to a particular encounter location. Regional effects are typically something weird going on. They're really designed to give a distinctive feel to an area. That something out of the ordinary, something fantastic and something powerful is influencing a territory. How big this area of effect is says a lot about how dangerous or powerful the problem is. At first, the players won't know if this is some ancient curse, some powerful artifact, an ancient magical effect, or a mythal in the area, some sort of divine influence, or some sort of lost ruin, otherworldly portal, or actual creature is causing these strange things to happen. In some cases, they might not know what they're actually experiencing is out of the ordinary. In case in point is the regional effect of the Belhanoth, which is going to be our chief bad guy of this particular exercise, which just emits a psychic lure to intelligent creatures, making them think that something they desire the most is located nearby, and the closer they get to the creature's lair, the stronger this feeling becomes. While at the same time, the Belhanoth is reading their mind to figure out what they desire exactly, so that it can create an illusion of it for when the victims get to its lair. Other regional effects can be far more obvious and spontaneous, just some storytelling on your part to get the players primed for some sort of serious danger nearby. For example, on their way to a wilderness monastery in one of my games, the weather was dreadful, raining and howling all night and most of the day, and then the storm suddenly stopped, and as the player characters got to within a mile of the monastery, the sky darkened and it rained dead flies and maggots over a wide area, so heavily that the characters were walking through a layer of maggots as if it was sticky mud. This happened because there was demon summoning going on within the monastery, and the surge of abyssal energy into the environment caused this sort of foul portent. Such things as milk turning to blood, fish dying in streams and ponds, horrid faces in clouds, winds that sound like screaming, spooked animals, and so on. All this really grabs the player's attention and draws them into what is going on. Legendary stuff is happening, and they're heading right into it. One thing I've not seen anyone talking about is the possibility of overlapping regional effects, and here I'll give another example to illustrate what this could be like. Within a mile of the Belhanoth's lair, the townsfolk and players feel that up on the nearby hilltop there is an old stone circle, and the locals have always called this the Night Songs. They have many stories of people who venture up there at night and are taken away by the Fey folk. In fact, legend has it that a boy chasing a stray goat got taken away and all thought him lost forever. But on his mother's deathbed, when she was an old woman, he returned to her side, not one day older than when he vanished, holding that same goat and with no memory of where he had been. The locals all feel the call of the night songs, they always have. It seems they call to them night and day lately though, and hardly anyone can get any work done without staring off at the hills, daydreaming, and nobody dared drink any alcohol for fear that they lose their wits and wander off up there. Everyone walks about in groups. People lock their doors at night for fear of sleepwalking. Some folks even tie their feet to the bed. If the high fields on the hillside don't get the crops brought down, nobody will have enough seed and root for the next planting season, and there will be starvation for sure. So the townsfolk are desperate, and things have lately got a lot worse. As the DM, you know that this is the lore and the call of the Belhanoth, which has moved into an old well near to these ancient standing stones, the Night Songs. It's true that the stones have a connection to the Feywild, as a powerful elven lord was entombed in a crypt beneath these stones 1,000 years ago, when this whole area was once unbroken forest. When the farmers dug a well Originally, quite close to those stone circles, they unwittingly dug right next to the tomb, and it caused a wall to collapse and disturb the crypt, which triggered a magical effect. And now, every full moon on a clear night, a portal to the Feywild opens in the center of the Standing Stones, up about between the hours of 2 and 3 a.m., or from sunrise to sunset on the nights of the summer and winter solstice. Sorry, from sunset to sunrise, all night on the winter solstice and summer solstice. Some people have gone missing. Fey folk certainly do come through, but none of them is concerned with the old crypt below up until recently, when the Balhanoth slithered out of the Feywild and moved into the well. It found a lovely lair in the ancient crypt, and the powerful regional effect began. The locals, a little bit hardened to psychic lures, proved to be very tough prey to lure into the lair, but as the adventurers arrive in town, the full moon rises over the horizon that night, and now, as satyrs and pixies prance and flutter in a musical dance about the stones, the Balhanoth lure overlaps and becomes powerful enough to fill the very dreams of everyone in the town. Even cats, dogs, and rabbits are seen wandering up the hillside towards the Standing Stones in a strange line, transfixed and hypnotized. Do the players decide to investigate? Do they fail some wisdom saving throws? However they get there, by the time they arrive, the Fey music stops and the night stones are deathly quiet once more. But where are the animals that came up here? Oh, a mystery. And difficult to track them in the lush grass until someone discovers the old, low stone walls of the abandoned well. And this close to the Balhanoth's lair, that lure is much, much stronger. So as you can see, when you overlap two regional effects and tie it into the local folklore, it really becomes quite a juicy story, with anecdotes, strange stuff like cats and dogs and rabbits marching together up a hillside, townsfolk doing weird stuff, sounds of distant music, perhaps a guilty offer of a coin if the players can solve the town's own problems. And when the players are finally at the entrance to the monster's lair, they have a whole lot of assumptions about what's going on, but actually they have no idea what they're about to face down there. They may have dutifully investigated folk tales from about the Fey folk, and now they have bags of salt, cold iron pry bars, and caltrops. They might even have clothes turned inside out, or who knows what they perceive, and prepared to deal with Fey magic. The wizard in the party might even have wasted spell prep on the wrong sorts of incantations. If they head down that well to investigate, they might get all the way to the bottom and discover both animal and human bones, so it might seem that they've solved the mystery of the people going missing up here. They've simply fallen down an old abandoned well. Okay, so let's put a peg on the Balhanoth for the moment. We will get back to that example encounter soon. Regional effects encompass everything outside of the actual combat encounter in your game. They are the footprint of this unusual creature in the D&D world. This includes its ecology, so the creatures that it eats, other wildlife that would normally be in this predator's niche, perhaps, that are displaced by this super predator. Why is there a giant spider creeping through a cornfield in the middle of the day, scaring the life out of local farmers? Perhaps because something even worse just moved into its old lair and kicked the spider out. Why are so they might have encountered that on their way to this town, for instance. Why are there no birds roosting in a great fig tree near the old broken tower anymore? Why did it take so long for the winter snow to thaw around the frozen pond this year, and where did all the fish go? What's eating all the sheep in the paddocks near the swamp? Do you think the farmers have got time to deal with this sort of nonsense when they have 8 kids to feed and 2 fields of turnips that need harvesting? Is the local law enforcement interested? Unless the farmers can prove it was bandits, toxic wizard waste dumping, or livestock rustlers. Are they reluctant to pester the local nobility about it? Because the last time this happened, the nobles raised the taxes and didn't actually solve the problem at all. Are they even willing to let adventurers investigate? If the last time that happened, an extremely upset young red dragon burnt half their village to the ground. Actually, it might be entirely likely that the local residents are living peaceful, if wary, lives in any particular area, and they'll be less than overjoyed if some loudmouth adventurer lets slip that they are there to plunder the ancient tomb, reopen an old abandoned mine, antagonize some legendary monster or whatnot. The adventurers may well find themselves unceremoniously escorted from town at the point of many spears and told in no uncertain terms to stay the hell out and mind their own business, preferably somewhere else. The town may actually have a favourable relationship with some regional effects that the adventurers could entirely screw up with their heroic antics. If an ancient white dragon has been slumbering under the local glacier for the last 50 years, a town nearby may have sprung up, making an absolute fortune, transporting long-lasting ice blocks to the entire kingdom as a superior form of refrigeration. The town may actually be famous for having 100 different flavors of snow cone. They may be the only place in the entire country that can grow frostbite peaches and the summer fruiting persimmons that otherwise only fruit in the late fall everywhere else. Yes, there is enormous and terrifying dragons somewhere under the ancient ice in that mountain valley, but it's never bothered anyone, and the old saying goes, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Imagine the characters kill the dragon, have a massive hoard of treasure to transport and trade, but the locals won't sell them a damn thing. They are drafting the fantasy equivalent of a class action lawsuit to make a legal claim for damages to their livelihoods. In as little as a few years to a decade, there may be nothing but a ghost town in an old cemetery left behind as all the townsfolk move away to seek better fortunes. Instead of a fabled dragon slayer reputation, the characters might pick up a reputation for being those idiots who killed all the frostbite peaches. Alright, back to our monster with the dreaded Belhanoth. Looking at this creature, a couple of points stand out that we can design the tomb space to accommodate. And here is the next concept that I lay on you. I am placing more emphasis on the creatures in the dungeon and selecting them first, and then I'm designing the dungeon around those creatures to make it a perfect match and give the players the best experience of what those creatures can do. So the Belhanoth is reasonably slow moving. It has a speed of 25 feet per round. However, it has an equal climbing speed, and its tentacle attacks are its main form of melee assault, and they have a reach of 10 feet. Plus, it can make 4 attacks on its own turn with those tentacles if it's not making a bite attack on its turn. So take note, I'm thinking about what it does on its turn, because the Belhanoth also has actions it can take on the player's turns. These are called legendary actions, and they are very important to this encounter. Legendary actions are taken by the monster after a player character or other creatures on a different initiative count have taken their actions. So even if there's only one player character and there's a few minion creatures around, the Belhanoth can still take those legendary actions. These legendary actions are like additional action slots that the creature can spend one at a time on different creatures' turns, and they restock at the start of each new round. This Belhanoth has 3 such legendary action slots each round, and 3 different actions it can choose to take. It might make 3 bite attacks. It might bite, teleport, and vanish for 10 minutes, or vanish, teleport, and then reappear after making a bite attack. The combination of these legendary actions and its own actions, and the behavior of any other creature in the tomb, along with specific features of this tomb, are your tools and the puzzle that the players need to figure out while they roll dice and fight for their characters' lives. So knowing that the Belhanoth, the star of our show, can teleport, turn invisible, attack with a reach weapon, and operate perfectly well on the roofs and walls, what creatures pair up very well and make logical sense to be there in the tomb originally, or to have shown up after the tomb was collapsed and the Belhanoth moved in there? First things that pop to my mind are the rot grubs, the oozes, and the undead. Also, given that the Belhanoth has blind sense out to 500 feet and can teleport 60 feet, I want this to be a large vaulted chamber with pillars and buttresses that support them. So if you flipped the room upside down and looked at it from the perspective of the Belhanoth, it would look like the series of 5-foot pits and raised walkways with pillars rising up from them to the flat roof, with a spiral of stone sarcophagi and a strange glowing pool in the middle, from the Belhanoth's perspective, as it moves around on the roof. This is the shape of the room, and it uses its tentacles to lash out at the player characters on the floor, grabbing them and teleporting out of sight into the dips between the buttress structures, so it can have partial concealment and cover, as well as its ability to vanish. On the floor, the collapse triggered the activation of some guardian mummies. However, and this is another concept I want to lay on you, I'm keeping some of these mummies in reserve, and I have a nickname for these additional critters. I call them Schrodingers. They're additional monsters, logically present in the encounter area or adjacent to it, that may or may not be activated and added to the encounter as it unfolds. And this could be from a triggering condition such as the wizard has cast thunderous explosions and things like that, which would alert creatures with a sense of hearing in the room nearby. So as the encounter unfolds, so there's 10 sarcophagi and a couple of wandering mummies. These two are quite hideously decrepit, and players may be fooled into thinking that they're nothing but animated skeletons with shredded funeral cloth hanging off them. And yeah, certainly add skeletons with bandages wrapped around them to freak out your players from time to time. Just saying, they may mistake them as zombies, as mummies. Their mistake. The reason these mummies look so decayed and chewed up is because they're infested with rot grubs. At any time during the fight, if things are going a little too easy on the player characters, feel free to have however many of these 8 other sarcophagi lids scrape heavily to the side and have another ancient elven undead rise from its grave. These might be mummies, they could be zombies, they could be wights. If you were feeling really mean, you could even be a bodak. Or the wandering undead first encountered could be bodak, and the undead in the sarcophagi could be mummies or wights or zombies or skeletons. But unless you activate them during the fight, they are just ancient elven corpses. They are like Schrodinger's cat. That's the basic idea. So they're either active or inactive. So they're either corpses or zombies or whatever. They're nothing until they are activated during the fight. These might be creatures in large cryotubes in a mind flayer laboratory. They might be webbed wrapped victims or babies of a giant spider. They might be diseased saplings from the body of an insane corrupted treant. You name it. You can probably fit some Schrodingers into almost all of your encounters. The other options, which I thought was one of the most useful innovation in 4th edition D&D, was the idea of minions. Minions behave like regular secondary creatures. They are enemies in the encounter, that they attack and do damage as per normal, but when it comes time to take damage, they only have 1 hit point. Also, minions take no damage from missed attacks, even if the attack normally deals half damage on a miss. These were massively useful for making mobs of goons that the players could just cleave through or blast with area effect damage, resulting in highly satisfying scenes of utter carnage. But they are also made important tactical options available as a dungeon master, delaying and dividing or at least distracting the player characters while the other creatures in the encounter did stuff in the background, got into better positions, or beat a hasty retreat. For example, if the other sarcophagi suddenly splintered apart and a pack of ghouls poured out of them, the Belhanoth might retreat to another hidden chamber above this one, closer to the circle of stones on the surface. It might even have some means of restoring some of its hit points, and another crop of creatures that could be up there. Let's say this exit is a secret panel that is like a well shaft connecting the chambers, and it's right above the strangely glowing pool. Now, the players have every reason to be highly skeptical of the glowing pool. I know I would be. They're right. It's nasty. It has an interesting reason for being there. This used to be a beautiful and rare collection of the favourite plants of the most important elf buried here, kept alive by a permanent light spell and protected by an enchantment around this circular garden depression. When the tomb wall collapsed, the sudden change in climate killed the plants, and the rotting attracted a few oozes. They have the same stats as a large gelatinous cube, except they're not cubes. They just move around like puddles of murky water, highly acidic and capable of lashing out with a pseudopod at anything that makes a physical contact with them, or automatically lashing out to any movement nearby within 5 feet if they've been damaged by any area effect, spell, or whatever. A nice little combo if you decide to include these minions, those minions, or if you have a fireball slinging wizard as one of your player characters in your party. The oozes are trapped in this round depression by the enchantment that contained the plants, and the pool is glowing from the magical light spell that sustained the plants. The other use of this living acid pool is that player characters who climb up with some difficulty to the secret connecting shaft the Belhanoth may have escaped into will fall directly into the acid pool, which will burn them even if the oozes were killed if they fall right into it. Now, before we even begin this fight, we determine what the treasure is, because if it does contain any magical items, there's no reason that any intelligent undead would not make use of them. Even a mummy with an intelligence of 6 might be magically instructed to use the magic item that you could add any number of crazy effects to this whole encounter, like a wand that can cast magical darkness, or a flask of oil, a glass jar of dormant rot grubs, for instance. There may be a few heirloom items of great value to the elven people, so you could expect magical longbows, boots of elven kind, long swords and suits of magical leather or chainmail, as well as books of spells, songs, poetry, fine goblets and decanters, delicate carvings of plants and animals, figurines of wondrous power, perhaps even an ion stone. Also, seeds which could act as healing potions, as they've been enchanted to keep them viable and alive for thousands of years inside the sarcophagi, thanks to the elves believing that in death there lies the seeds of new life. So it makes logical sense, story-wise, and through the lore of the elves. Okay, back to the fight. These legendary actions in combinations with other creatures, because this is probably the most complicated aspect of running an encounter like this, it's something that we need to concentrate on. On its turn, the Balhenoth can move 25 feet, it can attack with a bite and 2 melee attacks, or it can move 25 feet and attack with 4 tentacle attacks, or it can forego any attack and just dash 50 feet. You could represent this by the description of it detaching its loathsome slug-like body from the ceiling completely, trailing tendrils of goo, and using its tentacles to scramble and swing like some octopus spider. It makes sense to me that the Balhenoth would not normally use its bite attack on its own turn, unless all 4 of its weapon tentacles are occupied with restrained victims it has grappled and hoisted to be adjacent to its maw, because it could use those 3 legendary actions to make bite attacks throughout the round at the end of other creatures' turns. Now imagine that the fighter charges in and attacks the Balhenoth. It makes 4 tentacle attacks on its turn and latches on with 2 of them against that fighter. Yes, there's no reason why it would not double down on restraining the fighter, who can probably break free of 1 tentacle with ease. The DC is only 15, but if 1 tentacle is around the fighter's leg and the other are wrapped around the fighter's neck, they have to spend 2 actions just to break free of them both. Now, as the round continues, the Balhenoth is free to munch on that fighter 3 times in 1 round. It may decide to teleport with the fighter and hunker down in the partial cover and concealment of one of the trenches on the roof and snack on the fighter just a couple of times. But now it's up to 60 feet away from the rest of the party, and it may even be right above, you guessed it, the large circular pool of acidic ooze. So even if the fighter does break free, they dropped right down into bubbling Sizzletown. Meanwhile, down on the ground, absolute mayhem ensues, with the mummies making slam attacks and grapples with their rotting fist ability, characters making saber throws against the mummies' dreadful glare attacks, shrieking and scrambling back into the well shaft in fear if they fail their saving throw, and these mummies are infested with rot grubs, which, if you ask me, are one of the worst, most overpowered vermin ever to exist in Dungeons & Dragons. They literally give me the heebie-jeebies. You can find them on page 208 of Volo's Guide to Monsters. They come in swarms, and the only good thing about them really is that in an encounter this high in challenge rating, the characters are probably well protected from them. But if the rot grubs get lucky and manage to chew their way into a victim, it's going to almost certainly remove that character from active combat until they can deal with the rot grub infestation, or they'll probably die. Okay, that's a pretty good ramble. A lot of information there to process, I know, and not every combat encounter has to be this complex or well prepared. But you get the general idea of how I go about the planning process, and really, everything in Dungeons & Dragons, everything, is so much better when you mix it up with something else. Are your players not very keen on puzzle solving? Watch how fast they change their tune when they have to solve a puzzle to get a serious edge in a fight against some horrible creature, or to escape a room slowly filling up with green slime, or how about figuring out which stone circles to visit in a specific order of times and locations, matching up with astrology that they've learned from sages and things, in order to negotiate with specific Fey Lords and ladies who turn up at specific times, so they can acquire a powerful magical item to defeat a campaign boss, some sort of artifact. And this is why they showed up in the town in the first place, to visit the Night Song Stones. The plot thickens, and it never rests, nor should your imagination or your quest to master this, the greatest game ever invented. Just a reminder, if you've not subscribed already, feel free to do so, and be sure to hit that notification bell as I upload from the other side of the world sometime in your future. For access to all the scripts and 1 week advance access to these videos, consider becoming a patron of the channel on Patreon for a minimum of just $1 per month. Join the community on our Discord server, come say hi, perhaps even play some games with me. Also, if you could spare a moment to check out the merchandise and deals listed in the description text below, I'd certainly appreciate it. But as always, Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more for you again very soon.